I'm Emily, a 28-year-old art teacher living in the historic streets of Savannah, Georgia. Life had always been calm until I inherited a delicate porcelain doll from my late grandmother, Mildred. At first, its gentle, blank eyes brought me comfort, a bittersweet memento of family love and long-lost memories. But one eerie evening, as the shadows grew long and the wind whispered secrets, I began to sense that something was very wrong. A chill crept into my heart as I realized that the doll's stare might hide a terrible secret. I still remember the moment I first saw the porcelain doll among a box of old letters and faded photographs in my grandmother's belongings. I carefully placed it on my living room mantel in my modest Savannah apartment, thinking its cold, unblinking eyes would serve as a quiet reminder of the past. At that time, the doll's appearance felt oddly comforting, like a gentle guardian watching over me from another time. As night fell and the quiet of my home deepened, I began to feel a subtle unease. Every time I closed my eyes, it seemed as if the doll's gaze shifted ever so slightly, following my every move. I brushed it off as a trick of my tired mind, trying to convince myself that the old relic was nothing more than a cherished keepsake. Yet, in the stillness, soft creaks echoed around me, as if someone were whispering in a long-forgotten language. That very night, while lying in bed under the soft glow of my bedside lamp, I heard a faint, almost inaudible whisper coming from the direction of the doll. The sound was so quiet I doubted my senses at first, but as the minutes passed, the whisper grew clearer and more deliberate, filling the silence with an unsettling cadence. I lay frozen, heart pounding, and wondered if the porcelain figure really was watching me in the dark. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences grew more frequent. I would wake up to find the doll in a different position, as if it had moved on its own during the night. Its blank face, once a simple reminder of my grandmother's love, now exuded an aura of quiet malice. The air in my apartment grew heavy with tension, and each creak and rustle felt like a secret message I could not decipher. One afternoon, while cleaning my living room, I caught sight of a shadow shifting behind the doll. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving me trembling with uncertainty. Doubts crept into my mind. Was I merely overworked and imagining things? Or was something truly wrong? The doll's smooth porcelain seemed to hide an untold story, a secret so dark it slowly seeped into my everyday thoughts. Driven by a mixture of fear and desperate curiosity, I began researching its past. Late into the night, I pored over old family records, trying to trace the doll's origin. I discovered fragmented hints about a troubled spirit once wronged and cursed, a soul trapped within that lifeless object. With every page I turned, the haunting legacy of the doll became clearer, and I realized I was entangled in a curse that reached back through generations. Soon, the doll's eerie influence grew impossible to ignore. I started hearing soft, disembodied whispers when I was alone, murmurs that called my name and stirred a deep, unexplainable fear. The gentle sound, like a sigh lost in the darkness, resonated through every corner of my apartment, filling my nights with restless dread. It felt as though a hidden presence was trying to communicate, urging me to uncover a secret buried deep in the past. One sleepless night, I gathered the courage to confront the doll head-on. Clutching a small flashlight, I approached it slowly, half expecting it to move or react. In the wavering beam of light, I thought I saw a fleeting change in its expression, an almost imperceptible grimace that sent my heart racing. That brief, inexplicable moment made me question the reality of what I was witnessing and left me trembling with fear. The experience drove me to seek help from a local historian, Ms. Carter, renowned in Savannah for her knowledge of odd legends. When I described the whispers and the eerie movement of the doll, her eyes widened with concern. She explained that there was a dark history surrounding this relic, a curse born from a deep injustice and a vengeful soul that had long been trapped in porcelain. I listened, my mind reeling as the reality of my cursed inheritance began to sink in. Ms. Carter invited me to a cozy cafe near Forsyth Park, where we spread out old newspapers and faded diaries to piece together the doll's sinister history. She told me that the doll had once belonged to a sorrowful woman named Beatrice, whose life was filled with betrayal and sorrow. Over time, her anguish turned into a relentless curse, and her spirit was trapped inside the porcelain. destined to haunt anyone who dared to possess it. The deeper we dug into the past, the more I learned about the terrible connection between Beatrice and my family. According to old records, a long-forgotten feud had brought misfortune and despair to those I now called kin. I was horrified to discover that the curse was not random, but had been passed down through the generations, and a secret legacy that bound me to a fate I never chose. Every detail of the past confirmed that I was now part of this dark, unyielding mystery. In the nights that followed our meeting, the doll's influence intensified. Its eyes began to shimmer faintly in the darkness, and the once soft whispers grew into a chorus of urgent pleas. I fought against the mounting terror, but each act of resistance only seemed to tighten the curse's grip around my soul. The realization that this malevolent force was now intertwined with my life filled me with a growing dread that I could not escape. My nights turned into a relentless cycle of nightmares and waking terror. Sleep became a distant memory as the doll's presence haunted every corner of my mind. I woke in cold sweats, the echo of its whisper lingering in my ears as I struggled to differentiate between reality and a terrifying dream. Each day was a battle against an unseen force that had seeped into my very being. One fateful evening, as the shadows lengthened and the wind howled outside, I felt a sudden bone-chilling cold sweep through my apartment. I glanced at the table and saw the doll slightly tilted, its once placid face now marred by an expression that was both anguished and malevolent. In that moment, I understood that the curse was no longer a distant story. It was a living nightmare, blurring the line between my thoughts and the dark presence within the doll. In desperation, I reached out to Father Daniels, a gentle local priest known for his expertise with the supernatural. Sitting across from him in a quiet, candlelit room, I recounted every unsettling detail of my ordeal. His compassionate eyes betrayed a deep concern as he explained that the forces at work were ancient and vengeful. Despite his promise to help break the curse, a lingering fear gripped me. What if confronting this evil meant facing the darkest parts of my own soul? The final night arrived under a furious storm that raged over Savannah. Rain lashed against my windows and the wind roared like an angry spirit outside. Father Daniels and I prepared for the ritual in my dimly lit living room, where only a few flickering candles provided fragile light. The doll sat on a small table, its porcelain features unnervingly serene, as if daring us to break the curse that had haunted me for so long. As the ritual commenced, every gust of wind seemed to carry Beatrice's tormented voice. Father Daniels chanted ancient prayers while I clutched a worn family heirloom, a last attempt to hold on to a piece of my past. The oppressive air thickened, and for a moment the room felt as if it were closing in on me. I sensed that this was more than a simple exorcism. It was a battle for the soul of my family, a fight against a curse that had lingered for generations. In a heart-stopping climax, a surge of energy burst from the doll, shaking the very foundation of my home. Its eyes flared with an unearthly light as whispers escalated into a deafening chorus of sorrow and fury. In that terrifying moment, I realized that some curses cannot be easily broken. They seep into every part of you, leaving a mark that time can never erase. Saint. I'm Jessica, a 32-year-old elementary school teacher living in the rain-soaked streets of Seattle, Washington. My childhood was forever changed by a peculiar porcelain doll that belonged to my grandmother, Ruth. Back then, I found solace in its blank face and quiet presence, unaware of the darkness it harbored. Even now, as the memory lingers, I can recall the cold shiver that ran down my spine during stormy nights when the doll's eerie whispers seemed almost real. It was a secret that would come back to haunt me. I remember my early years with an odd mixture of nostalgia and dread. In the dim light of my family's modest home in Seattle, the doll sat on a dusty shelf, its painted eyes forever fixed in a vacant stare. As a little girl, I was both enchanted and comforted by its silent companionship. I played pretend tea parties and whispered secrets to it, never suspecting that beneath its smooth porcelain lay a sinister presence waiting to awaken. Life in that old house was filled with simple joys, a warm cup of cocoa by the window, laughter echoing in the halls. But there was always an unspoken chill around the doll. Even on bright, sunny days, a subtle tension filled the air, as if the toy watched every move with a secret knowledge. I remember once catching a glimpse of its lips, which for an instant seemed curved in a cold, mocking smile. That fleeting moment planted a seed of unease that I couldn't quite explain. Years passed in a blur of school, play, and innocent wonder, until one night the atmosphere shifted dramatically. I was tucked in bed when I thought I heard a soft, almost inaudible giggle coming from the direction of the shelf. The sound, laced with an otherworldly quality, broke the silence and made my heart pound in terror. I lay there, paralyzed by fear, wondering if it was merely my imagination or something far more malevolent. As I grew older, the memories of that peculiar doll began to haunt me, resurfacing in dreams and whispers of recollection. Returning to my childhood home for a visit, I couldn't shake the feeling that the past was still very much alive. The doll, now encased in a glass display, seemed to observe me with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. I felt as though it carried the weight of every secret and sorrow of generations, silently reminding me of an ominous legacy. Late one afternoon, while dusting off the shelves in the attic, I found old photographs and faded letters that hinted at a mysterious origin. The documents spoke of strange occurrences and unexplained events tied to the doll's arrival in our family, a gift from a distant relative whose life was shrouded in misfortune. Each word I read deepened the chill that had settled over me, as if the very air had grown heavier with a foreboding energy. I began to suspect that the doll was more than a simple keepsake. That evening, as dark clouds rolled in over Seattle and rain began to pelt the windows, I felt an undeniable pull to confront the past. I retrieved the glass case from the attic and carried it into the living room, my pulse quickening with each step. The wind howled outside as I unlatched the case, and for a moment, the doll's expression seemed to change, its eyes glimmering with a cold, malevolent light. In that instant, I knew that the spirit residing within it was awakening. It was during one violent storm years ago that everything changed. I was lying awake in bed when the roar of thunder was suddenly joined by a whisper, clear as day, calling my name. "Jessica," it breathed, the voice soft, but laden with a terrible promise. My heart raced, and I fumbled for the light, only to see the doll perched silently on the shelf, its eyes now impossibly vivid. I could hardly believe my ears. The doll had spoken, shattering the fragile barrier between childhood fantasy and unearthly terror. Shaken to my core, I spent the rest of the night in restless disbelief, wondering if the storm had conjured illusions, or if something far darker was at work. Every flash of lightning revealed a different angle of the room, and in each fleeting moment, I saw the doll's form twist into shapes that defied explanation. It was as though the boundaries between life and the supernatural were dissolving, and I was caught in the middle of a nightmare from which I could not awaken. The storm passed, but its aftermath left an indelible mark on my soul. I found myself haunted by the doll's disembodied call, and in the quiet moments after the tempest, I would hear that same voice echoing softly around me. The experience became a turning point, forcing me to confront a secret that had lurked in the shadows of my family for decades. I realized then that I was entwined with a curse, a dark force that had followed me since childhood and threatened to unmoor my very sanity. Determined to understand the evil that plagued me, I began an exhaustive search into my family's past. I visited the local library in Seattle and met with an elderly historian named Mr. Henderson, renowned for his expertise on the city's eerie folklore. Together, we pored over brittle records and yellowed letters that hinted at an ancestral betrayal and a malevolent curse linked to that very doll. Every document painted a picture of sorrow, vengeance, and a supernatural force that had been passed down through generations. The more I uncovered, the more the pieces fell into place. A tale of a distant relative who had dabbled in forbidden rituals, and a doll created as a vessel for a spirit thirsting for retribution. Mr. Henderson explained that the doll was never meant to be a simple toy. It was a container for a restless soul, condemned to wander and exact its dark will upon those it deemed unworthy. I learned that the doll's unsettling transformations and its uncanny ability to mimic emotions were manifestations of that spirit's wrath. Armed with this grim knowledge, I began to notice changes in my own life. The once familiar corners of my Seattle home grew oppressive, and shadows seemed to creep along the walls even in daylight. It was as if the malevolent spirit, bound to the doll, had started to seep into every aspect of my existence. I could no longer ignore the feeling that every glance from that porcelain face was a silent reminder of an impending doom, a curse that threatened to consume not only my peace but my very sanity. Night after night, the oppressive presence of the doll grew more intense. I would wake in the early hours to find the room bathed in an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards. The doll's porcelain features, once a source of innocent comfort, had become an emblem of dread. Its eyes seemed to follow my every movement, and in the darkness, I sometimes imagined that they flickered with a life of their own, a life driven by hatred and sorrow. I attempted to distance myself from the cursed relic, even going so far as to pack it away in an old trunk stored in the attic. Yet, no matter how far I tried to separate myself from its influence, the terror persisted. Unexplained phenomena began to plague my home. Doors that opened on their own, disembodied laughter echoing in empty corridors, and a persistent cold draft that seemed to carry whispers of long-buried secrets. Each incident chipped away at my sense of reality, leaving me to wonder if I would ever be free of the evil that clung to my every thought. In my desperate search for relief, I turned to modern technology, installing cameras and motion sensors throughout my house. The recordings were chilling, fleeting images of a porcelain figure moving with impossible speed, and nights filled with soft, sinister murmurs that no one could explain. These undeniable pieces of evidence confirmed my worst fears. The doll was not a mere artifact of the past, but a living conduit for a malevolent force that was steadily unraveling the fabric of my everyday life. The mounting terror forced me to seek help beyond my own efforts. I reached out to a renowned paranormal investigator, Ms. Rivera, whose reputation in Seattle for confronting the unexplainable was well known. With a mix of skepticism and hope, I invited her into my home, determined to confront the dark legacy head-on. Ms. Rivera set up her equipment with meticulous care, her calm demeanor belying the gravity of the situation. Together, we embarked on a quest to understand and possibly exorcise the malevolent spirit that resided within the doll. Throughout the long, tense hours of our investigation, Ms. Rivera recorded phenomena that defied logic. Flickering lights, sudden drops in temperature, and an overwhelming feeling of despair filled every room. At one point, the doll seemed to levitate slightly off its shelf, its eyes glowing with a spectral intensity that chilled even the seasoned investigator. With every piece of evidence gathered, it became painfully clear that this was no ordinary haunting. The spirit inside the doll was not only real, it was vengeful, relentless, and determined to reclaim its power. As the investigation progressed, I found myself questioning my own sanity. The constant barrage of supernatural events left me exhausted and emotionally drained. I began to see the doll in every shadow, hear its taunting whispers in every gust of wind. Despite Ms. Rivera's best efforts, the curse appeared to grow stronger, as if feeding on my fear. I realized that the darkness that had invaded my home was not something that could be easily banished. It was a part of my life now, forever, intertwined with my very soul. In a final, desperate bid for liberation, I decided to confront the spirit directly. One stormy night, echoing the terror of my childhood, I gathered my courage and placed the doll in the center of my living room. The wind howled through the cracks in the old walls of my Seattle home as I recited a plea for mercy, a prayer taught to me by a trusted friend from church. The air grew thick with tension, as if the house itself were holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash between my resolve and the sinister force that dwelled within the porcelain. Moments later, the doll began to tremble violently, its cold, unyielding face twisting into an expression of pure malice. A surge of energy burst forth, rattling the windows and shaking the very foundation of my home. In that heart-stopping instant, I saw the spirit's true form, a shadowy, contorted figure with eyes that burned like embers of wrath. The entity screamed in a voice that was both ancient and sorrowful, as if mourning a lost chance at redemption. I felt my own sanity teeter on the edge, caught between the hope of banishing this evil and the terror of what might follow if it succeeded. The encounter left me forever changed. Even though the furious energy subsided and the doll returned to its inert state, the darkness it unleashed never truly vanished. I now live with the constant reminder that some curses cannot be broken. They become a part of you, lingering in the recesses of your mind. As I stand in the quiet aftermath, I wonder if the spirit will ever rest, or if its malevolent presence will continue to haunt me, whispering secrets of despair in the dead of night. Ever since I was a little girl in New Orleans, I loved my dolls. One in particular always intrigued me, a porcelain doll with delicate features that seemed to hold secrets. As the years passed, I began to notice soft whispers emanating from it during the quiet hours of night. Alone in my room, I heard a voice revealing a long-forgotten murder, a secret so chilling it chipped away at my sanity. Now those whispers pull me into a past filled with horror and guilt, a crime I fear might be tied to me. I grew up surrounded by the charm of New Orleans, where every street corner held a story and every shadow danced with mystery. My collection of dolls was my treasure, but one porcelain doll stood apart. With its gentle painted eyes and a faded dress, it always exuded an air of quiet sadness. I would spend hours talking to it, believing it to be just an innocent playmate. Yet, at night, when the city's lively music softened into distant jazz and the humid air settled in, I began to hear faint whispers that seemed to come from deep within its tiny form. At first, I dismissed those sounds as tricks of my imagination, born from lonely nights in my cramped attic bedroom. The whispers were barely audible, a soft murmur in a language I could not understand. I told myself it was just the wind sneaking through the old wooden windows of our centuries-old house. But the more I listened, the more the voice felt familiar, as if it carried a burden of memories that were not mine. I started to feel a strange connection to the doll, as though it was trying to tell me something important about a past I never knew existed. One humid summer evening, after a heavy rain had washed the streets clean, I sat alone in my dimly lit room. The whispers grew louder and clearer, forming words that sent a chill down my spine. I distinctly heard it say a name and mention a murder that had long been buried in time. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that the doll was not merely a toy. It was a keeper of secrets, holding a dark story that I was now a part of. That night, the line between my cherished memories and a creeping, sinister truth began to blur. Haunted by that fateful night, I embarked on a journey to uncover the truth behind the doll's eerie revelations. I started by digging through old family albums and letters stored in a dusty box in the attic. Among yellowed pages and faded photographs, I found hints of a mystery, a forgotten murder that had once rocked our small New Orleans community. I learned of a tragic event involving a young woman whose life ended in bloodshed, a crime that everyone had long tried to forget. Each discovery filled me with both dread and an irresistible need to know more. Determined to piece together the puzzle, I visited the local library and combed through archived newspapers. The headlines spoke of a violent act and a cover-up that had left scars on the city's soul. I found an article that mentioned a missing doll, rumored to have been present at the scene of the crime. My pulse quickened as I connected the dots. The doll I had always adored might be a silent witness to that horrific night. With each newspaper clipping and interview with old residents, the story grew darker, intertwining my childhood memories with a macabre legacy. Late one rainy afternoon, I met an elderly librarian who recalled whispers about a cursed relic passed down through generations. Her voice trembled as she described how the doll was linked to a mysterious woman who had been wronged and silenced forever. The librarian's eyes widened with caution as she urged me to be careful, warning that some secrets are meant to remain hidden. As I left the library, the weight of what I had learned pressed down on me. Each step on the rain-soaked pavement felt like a march toward a destiny I was powerless to change. That night, as the storm raged over New Orleans, I could no longer ignore the growing terror. In the dim glow of a flickering lamp, I sat in my room with the doll cradled in my arms. The humid air was filled with the sound of distant thunder and the persistent whisper of the doll. Its voice, now clear and haunting, recited details of the murder, the name of the victim, the place where the crime occurred, and even the dreadful manner in which it had been committed. I listened in disbelief as the porcelain figure unveiled. Memories of pain and betrayal, each word slicing through the silence of the night. The revelations were overwhelming, and I began to question my own sanity. Was it possible that the doll's dark secret was a twisted echo of my own past? I recalled fragmented memories from childhood, strange shadows, an inexplicable sense of guilt, and a fear that I had once done something unforgivable. The voice from the doll seemed to connect those dots, linking me to a crime that I couldn't fully remember. Every whispered detail made my heart ache with an unfamiliar remorse, and I started to wonder if I had somehow been entangled in a tragedy I never truly understood. As the night deepened, the whispers intensified until they were nearly deafening. I felt an unbearable weight on my chest, as if the doll was forcing its sorrowful truth into my very soul. My hands trembled, and tears blurred my vision as I realized that the guilt it evoked was real, a guilt tied to a past I had long repressed. In that unbearable moment, I stood at the crossroads of fear and revelation, uncertain if I was the innocent victim or a hidden accomplice in a crime that had forever marked my life with horror. In the days that followed, I resolved to confront the terrible truth head-on. I began to keep a journal, writing down every detail of the doll's whispers and the memories they unearthed. Each entry became a desperate attempt to understand the connection between the cursed doll and the dark secret of that forgotten murder. I revisited old haunts around New Orleans, speaking to relatives and neighbors who might shed light on the past. The city itself, with its winding streets and moss-draped oaks, seemed to whisper caution and sorrow in every corner. My search led me to a shocking discovery: a long-lost diary belonging to a distant relative whose words painted a picture of despair and betrayal. The diary detailed a night of terror, a murder committed in a fit of rage and covered up by those desperate to keep the family name untarnished. As I read the raw, painful entries, I could feel the weight of the guilt that had haunted my bloodline. The realization hit me hard. The doll, with its silent watchfulness, was not only a keeper of secrets, but a mirror reflecting a dark truth that might implicate me. The burden of that forgotten crime pressed upon me, and I felt as if I were slowly being consumed by the very horror I had tried to escape. In a final heart-wrenching act of courage, I decided to lay the past to rest once and for all. Under a stormy sky, I returned to the old family estate on the outskirts of New Orleans, carrying the doll and the diary. I placed them together in the quiet courtyard, where I spoke aloud a promise to break the cycle of guilt and silence. As the wind picked up and the rain began to fall, the doll's whispers faded into the night, leaving behind a fragile hope that some secrets might finally be laid to rest. Yet even now, as I try to move forward, I know that the echoes of that horrifying secret will forever linger in the shadows of my soul. Thank you very much for watching today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to stay informed when the next video comes out. And tell me, what did you think of today's stories? See you in the next video.